I tried hunting a giant Bigfoot. It was the worst mistake I ever did in my life, but for some strange reason, it let me live to tell this tale. I woke up hanging in a tree. That's how this story begins, not with some dramatic build-up or clever introduction, just me 15 feet off the ground, wedged in branches with 3 cracked ribs and a head that felt like someone had used it for batting practice. Stars visible through the canopy. Total darkness, except for moonlight filtering through the leaves, and the only thought running through my pain-fogged brain was, how the hell did I get here? Oh, and why was I still alive after shooting a Bigfoot twice in the chest? Let me back up. My name doesn't matter, but what I did for 31 years does. I was a forest ranger in the Pacific Northwest, retiring last spring after 3 decades of patrols, rescues, wildlife management, and enough paperwork to choke a grizzly. When people ask what I saw out there, I give them the tourist-friendly version: black bears, elk, the occasional cougar. What I don't mention are the other things, the things that made me spend those last 5 years volunteering for every remote patrol, every overnight assignment, every reason to be out there alone in the deep woods. I was obsessed. That's the word my ex-wife used during the divorce proceedings, and I can't argue with it. When your marriage falls apart and your kids barely call anymore, you have 2 choices: wallow in it or find something else to focus on. I chose obsession, and the object of that obsession was proving that something else walked those forests besides the animals in the field guides. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. You want to know why I shot a Sasquatch? You need to understand how I got there. You need to hear about the encounters that came before, the one that built from curiosity into certainty, from skepticism into something close to madness. 15 years ago, early in my career, I was on a routine morning patrol near Twin Forks Creek. The sun had just broken the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mist still hung in the low spots like ghostly curtains, and everything was quiet except for the early morning bird calls, chickadees and nuthatches mostly, their cheerful notes echoing through the trees. The air was cool and damp, that perfect temperature where your breath forms small clouds, but you're not quite cold enough to zip your jacket all the way up. I stopped to check the water levels where the trail crossed the creek. Standard procedure, we kept logs of water levels to predict flooding during spring runoff. That's when I saw them, footprints in the mud along the creek bank, fresh ones. So fresh that water was still seeping into the impressions from the disturbed ground. The edges were sharp, not yet degraded by wind or water. These had been made within the last few hours, maybe less. Now I'd seen plenty of bear tracks in my years patrolling these forests. Black bears are common in the Pacific Northwest, and their tracks are distinctive. 5 toes with claw marks, but the overall shape is different from human prints. These weren't bear tracks. The shape was all wrong. These were 18 inches long, maybe 8 inches wide at the ball of the foot. 5 distinct toes arranged in a pattern similar to human feet. No claw marks. The stride length was enormous, over 6 feet between prints. Whatever made these was walking upright with a stride that would make an NBA player look like a toddler. But what really got me, what made my hands shake as I knelt there in the mud examining them, were the details. When mud's the right consistency, not too wet, not too dry, you can see dermal ridges in a print. The equivalent of fingerprints for footprints. These had them. Clear as day, you could see the patterns of the skin that had made these impressions. That's not something a hoaxer in a costume creates. That's biology. That's real skin making real contact with real mud. I followed those tracks for half a mile, photographed them, measured them, followed them until they hit a rocky slope and vanished. When I got back to the station, I filed a report. My supervisor looked at the photos for about 10 seconds before handing them back. He said it was probably just a bear walking weird, maybe someone's idea of a prank. Suggested I not waste time on stuff like this when we had real work to do. I learned my lesson: keep sightings to yourself. But I kept looking. 3 years later, I was doing boundary checks in a section of old-growth forest where no logging had occurred in over a century. Dense canopy blocked most of the sunlight, creating an eternal twilight on the forest floor. Minimal undergrowth because not enough light penetrated to sustain it. Trees so massive around their trunks that you'd need 3 or 4 people linking hands to hug them. Some of these giants were probably 500 years old or more, silent witnesses to centuries of history. And that's when I heard it. Wood knocking, not the random creaking and cracking you sometimes hear when dead branches rub together in the wind. This was rhythmic, systematic, deliberate. 3 knocks, distinct and evenly spaced. Pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Over and over. The pattern never varied, like someone was tapping out a code on a hollow log. It came from deeper in the forest, maybe a quarter mile off. I stood there listening for 10 minutes. The pattern never deviated. This wasn't a woodpecker, wasn't a tree falling, wasn't wind knocking dead branches together. This was communication. I could feel it in my gut. Something was sending signals. I went looking for the source and found the structures instead. 3 of them, massive logs, each one probably 400 pounds, stacked in formations that made no natural sense. One was a teepee shape, perfect tripod. Another was an archway made from bent saplings with logs braced across the top. The third was harder to describe, interwoven branches creating a kind of lean-to shelter. Bears don't build structures. They don't carefully position 400-pound logs in geometric patterns. They don't weave branches. This required intelligence. This required hands. This required something that understood construction. The third encounter happened on a night patrol about 8 years ago. I was driving a service road that cuts through a narrow valley between 2 ridges. The road's barely maintained, more like 2 dirt tracks with grass and small saplings growing between them. And you have to watch constantly for washouts, fallen trees, and rocks that have rolled down from the slopes. I had my headlights on high beam, creeping along at maybe 20 miles per hour, windows down, so I could hear if anything unusual was happening in the forest around me. Something crossed the road about 40 yards ahead of me. The whole sequence took maybe 2 seconds, but time seemed to slow down the way it does in high-stress situations. In the split second it took for this thing to cross from the tree line on my left to the tree line on my right, maybe 2 long strides, I saw everything. Every detail burned into my memory like a photograph. The figure was massive, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, proportioned like a human but scaled up, like someone had taken a person and enlarged them 30% in every dimension. Covered in dark hair that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, not the shiny, healthy gleam of a bear's coat, but something duller, almost like it was designed to avoid being seen. Moving on 2 legs with a gait that was fluid and powerful, nothing like the upright stumble of a bear on its hind legs, and nothing like a human walk either. This was something in between, or something altogether different. Economical movement, no wasted motion, each step purposeful and silent. Right before it disappeared into the darkness, it turned its head toward me. Just for a second, just long enough for the headlights to catch its eyes. They reflected red like a deer's eyes in a spotlight, but larger, higher off the ground. Then it was gone, melted into the forest like smoke. I sat there with my foot on the brake, engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. In 3 seconds, my understanding of what lived in those woods had fundamentally changed. This wasn't tracks in the mud or sounds in the distance. This was a direct sighting. This was confirmation. The fourth encounter was different, more disturbing. I found a deer carcass wedged in a tree fork 12 feet off the ground. A full-grown doe, probably 180 pounds. Something, had lifted that deer up and carefully positioned it in the tree. Not thrown it there, not dragged it up, positioned it. The carcass showed bite marks, and the meat had been systematically removed from the bones. But there was no tearing, no chaotic feeding frenzy. This was methodical. Mountain lions cache kills in trees sometimes, but they can't get anything that heavy up that high. Bears will climb, but they don't cache food like that. This was something else, something that could lift nearly 200 pounds 12 feet up, and had the intelligence to store food above ground level where other predators couldn't reach it. 4 encounters over about a decade, 4 pieces of evidence that, taken individually, might have explanations. Taken together, they painted a picture. Something large, bipedal, intelligent, and strong lived in those forests. Something that knew how to avoid humans. Something that had remained hidden for centuries despite thousands of people tramping through its territory every year. And then came the disappearance that changed everything. 6 years ago, we hired a new ranger fresh out of training. Early 20s, enthusiastic as hell, still had that idealistic shine that the job eventually grinds off everyone. He'd grown up camping with his folks, done some volunteer trail maintenance in college, read all the right books. On paper, he was perfect. In practice, he was green as spring grass and just as soft. But he was eager, I'll give him that. Always first to volunteer for the tough assignments, always asking questions, always taking notes. 4 months in, he learned the basics, could navigate by compass and map, knew his wildlife identification, handled a radio properly, understood the protocols. Still needed supervision on the complex stuff, but for routine patrols, he was competent enough. That Tuesday in October, we had a standard patrol scheduled for the northeastern sector, remote area, maybe 15 miles of trails to check, survey a couple of campsites, document any issues. 2-person job normally. But it was straightforward enough that one experienced ranger could handle it solo. I was supposed to go with him, training exercise, show him the ropes on the longer patrols. That morning, my wife called. Ex-wife now, but she was still my wife then. She'd been having health problems for a few months, nothing life-threatening, but enough to need regular specialist appointments. That morning, her doctor's office had called with an opening. Could you get in that afternoon? It was a 2-hour drive each way. She needed me to take her. I should have rescheduled the patrol, should have told the kid to wait until the next day when I could go with him. Hell, I should have taken my wife to her appointment first thing in the morning and done the patrol later that afternoon. But I didn't. The kid said he could handle it solo, said he knew the route, had done similar patrols, would be fine. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because my wife needed me and I was trying to be a good husband. I let him go alone. He never came back. When he didn't check in by 1800 hours, 6 p.m., the alarm bells started ringing. Ranger protocol requires check-ins every 4 hours minimum on solo patrols. More frequently if the terrain is dangerous or weather is questionable. He'd radioed in at 0900 when he reached the first checkpoint, his voice cheerful and confident, reporting that everything looked good and he was proceeding to the next waypoint. That was the last anyone heard from him. We tried raising him on the radio throughout the afternoon. Nothing, just empty static. Tried his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, which probably meant he was in a dead zone. Not unusual in that terrain, but it could also mean the phone was off or damaged. By 1830, we had a full search team mobilizing. I was on that first search team. Drove like hell to get back from the city, made the 2-hour drive in 90 minutes. We went out with flashlights and spotlights, calling his name, following his planned route. Found his truck at the trailhead just before midnight. Radio was mounted in the dashboard, untouched. His emergency pack was in the back seat. Everything looked normal. We couldn't do much in the dark, so we posted guards at the trailhead and regrouped at first light. By dawn, we had 20 people searching, rangers, local law enforcement, volunteer SAR teams. We found his day pack near a creek about 2 miles in, right where his patrol route would have taken him. The pack was sitting upright on a rock like he'd just set it down. Inside, his lunch, water bottle, first aid kit, rain gear. And his radio switched off. That radio being off was a protocol violation. We keep them on always, even when we're on routine checks. Battery life isn't an issue. These things run for 36 hours on a charge. There's no reason to turn them off. But his was off. Deliberately switched off or knocked off, we couldn't tell. We searched for 3 weeks, brought in cadaver dogs, thermal imaging, helicopters with FLIR cameras, combed every inch of that sector and the adjacent ones. We found nothing, no blood, no torn clothing, no disturbed ground suggesting a struggle, no tracks except his boot prints, which went up to that rock by the creek and just stopped, like he'd been plucked off the earth by a giant hand. The official investigation considered everything. Bear attack was first on the list, but bears leave evidence. Lots of evidence. They trash campsites, leave scat, leave hair on trees, leave claw marks. We found nothing. Mountain lion attack was next, but same problem. No blood, no drag marks, no cached remains. Big cats kill by ambush, and they usually cache their kills within a few hundred yards. We searched a mile radius from that creek. Nothing. Foul play was investigated. They looked at everyone he knew, everyone he'd interacted with, any possible enemies or conflicts. Came up empty. Kid was clean as snow. No gambling debts, no romantic entanglements, no arguments with anyone. And anyway, the logistics didn't work. To get a body out of that location without leaving traces, you'd need a vehicle. But the nearest road access was 5 miles away, and there were no tire tracks on any of the access roads. They looked at accident scenarios, fall from a height, no cliffs in the immediate area, and we'd searched every ravine and drop-off within 10 miles. Drowning, the creek was 6 inches deep. Getting lost, he had a GPS unit, a compass, and he knew how to use both. Plus, we'd covered every square mile of terrain within a 20-mile radius. Weather exposure? It was October, but still mild. Lows in the 40s, no precipitation. He was dressed appropriately and had his gear. After 3 weeks, the official search was suspended. Too dangerous for the search teams, especially with winter coming on. The case stayed open as a missing person investigation, but the realistic expectation was that his body would turn up eventually. Spring thaw usually reveals what winter hides. Hunters or hikers would stumble across remains. Something would surface. Nothing ever did. 6 years later, he's still officially listed as missing, presumed dead. But I knew. I couldn't prove it, couldn't even voice it without sounding crazy, but I knew. The only thing that could remove a person without leaving a trace was something with intelligence. Something that understood human patterns and patrol routes and timing. Something that knew how to hide evidence. Something strong enough to physically carry a 180-pound man far enough away that we'd never find him. A bear or a mountain lion? They're powerful, but they're not smart. They leave trails. They can't help it. It's biology. But something with human-level intelligence, or better, something that lived in these woods for generations and had learned to avoid detection, that could make someone disappear. That could erase evidence. That could turn off a radio. It was a Sasquatch. Had to be. Nothing else fit. And it was my fault he'd encountered it alone because I should have been there with him. That guilt ate at me for 6 years, through the final years of my marriage falling apart, through the divorce, through my kids drifting away because I was always distracted, always somewhere else mentally even when I was physically present, through retirement and the empty house that followed. That guilt became fuel, became purpose, became the thing that got me out of bed each morning. And once I retired, once I had no more obligations, no more protocols to follow, no more supervisor telling me to focus on real work, I made a decision. I was going to find the Sasquatch. I was going to get answers, even if it killed me in the process. I spent 3 months planning. I wasn't going into this blind. Over 31 years as a ranger, I'd kept meticulous personal records of everything unusual I'd encountered. Footprints, wood knocking, sightings, tree structures, strange vocalizations heard at night. I had dates, locations, GPS coordinates, photographs, notes, stuff I'd never filed officially because I knew how it would be received. I spread a topographic map across my kitchen table and marked every incident with colored pins. Red for footprints, blue for structures, yellow for sightings, green for vocalizations. After 31 years, there were a lot of pins. And they weren't randomly scattered. They formed patterns, clusters, especially in one area, a remote wilderness zone about 8 miles from the nearest maintained trail. Same general region where the young ranger had disappeared. The area had everything a large, secretive creature would need. Dense forest cover, multiple water sources, abundant wildlife for hunting. Terrain rugged enough to discourage casual hikers, no cell service, no roads within 5 miles. Perfect habitat for something that wanted to remain hidden. I bought a high-powered hunting rifle. Nothing fancy, a .30-06 with a decent scope. Enough stopping power for elk or bear, which meant enough for whatever I might face. I practiced at the range until I could put 5 shots in a 3-inch group at 100 yards. Bought a backup handgun, a .44 Magnum revolver. Overkill for anything normal, but I wasn't hunting anything normal. Gathered supplies for 2 weeks in the wilderness, freeze-dried food, water filtration, cold weather sleeping bag, tent, first aid kit. Enough ammunition to fight a small war. Trail cameras with motion sensors, set to photograph anything that triggered them. I wasn't trying to study Sasquatch from a distance. I wasn't trying to observe and document. I was going there to confront one face-to-face, and I was going there armed. My kids found out about the plan when I mentioned it during one of our rare phone calls. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Midlife crisis mixed with retirement depression, mixed with unresolved grief over the divorce. They tried to talk me out of it, suggested therapy instead, suggested taking a cruise, joining a gym, getting a hobby that didn't involve hunting imaginary monsters in the wilderness. I went anyway, told them I was going on a camping trip, which was technically true, didn't mention the arsenal or the fact that I was specifically hunting the most elusive cryptid in North American folklore. No point arguing. They'd made up their minds that I was crazy, and maybe they were right. Didn't matter, I was going. Mid-September, I loaded my truck and drove to the trailhead. 5-hour drive from my house. Last 2 hours on progressively worse roads until I was creeping along at 10 miles per hour on rutted dirt barely wide enough for my vehicle. Parked where the road ended and hefted my pack. 70 pounds of gear. Heavy, but I'd carried worse during my ranger days. The hike in took 5 hours, 8 miles as the crow flies, but closer to 12 on the ground because of terrain. Elevation gain of 3,000 feet. I stopped twice to rest and checked my GPS, making sure I was hitting my waypoints. By the time I reached my planned campsite, a small clearing on a ridge with good visibility, the sun was getting low and my legs were rubber. I set up camp efficiently. Ranger habits die hard. Tent positioned for weather protection and visibility. Food hung in a bear bag away from camp. Rifle cleaned and loaded, kept in the tent within arm's reach. Handgun in a holster on my belt. I positioned my trail cameras in a grid pattern covering the approaches to my camp, figuring anything moving through the area would trigger at least one of them. Then I waited. First 3 days were quiet. Too quiet, actually. Normal forests are noisy places if you know how to listen. Birds calling to each other, squirrels chittering and rustling through the leaf litter, insects humming, branches creaking in the wind, the distant sound of water moving over rocks. This forest felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume on reality. The birds called, but they sounded distant and hesitant. I saw deer sign, tracks, droppings, browse marks on shrubs. But I never spotted the deer themselves. Found fresh elk droppings in several locations, but the elk stayed invisible. It felt like the wildlife was avoiding this particular area, giving it a wide berth. And that was exactly what I'd expect if a large predator was operating nearby. Animals know things. They sense danger before humans do. Day 4, I found footprints, fresh ones less than a day old. They were along a creek about half a mile from my camp in a muddy stretch where the water had recently receded. 18 inches long, human-shaped but wider, 5 toes with clear separation, dermal ridges visible in the mud, stride length of about 6.5 feet. Something big had walked through here recently. I photographed the prints from multiple angles, measured them, followed the trail. The tracks led upstream for almost 2 miles before hitting rocky ground where they vanished. But I'd seen enough. They were real, they were recent, and they were heading in the general direction of my camp. I set up an observation post near where I'd found the tracks, found a spot with good concealment and visibility, settled in with my rifle and binoculars and watched, waited. The sun moved across the sky, my back got stiff, my legs cramped, I barely moved, barely breathed, just watched. Day 5 brought the wood knocks, same pattern I'd heard years before. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Coming from somewhere to the north, maybe a quarter mile away, echoing through the trees. I stayed in my observation post until dark, then carefully made my way back to camp. The knocks continued intermittently all evening, always from roughly the same direction. That night, lying in my tent, I had the distinct feeling of being watched, not paranoia. I'd spent enough nights alone in the wilderness to know the difference. This was the same feeling you get when someone's staring at you from across a room. The hair-raising, primal brain awareness that you're the object of focused attention. I kept my rifle next to me and barely slept. Day 6, I found a tree structure, fresh one. A dozen saplings had been systematically bent over and twisted together, forming an archway about 7 feet high. The breaks were recent, sap still wet, wood still flexible. This hadn't been created by wind or falling trees or natural forces. This was deliberate construction, and it was positioned right along one of the game trails I'd been monitoring. A marker, a territorial sign, a message? I had no idea. But it meant I was close. Something was active in this area, and it was doing things that required opposable thumbs and intelligence. Day 7, one of my trail cameras captured something. I'd been checking them every evening, swapping out memory cards, reviewing footage. Most of it was boring, branches moving in the wind, a couple of deer, a fox. But the camera I'd positioned along the north approach to my camp had triggered at 3:17 a.m. The footage showed a large, dark shape moving past the camera. Brief, maybe 3 seconds of usable video. The shape was massive, upright, moving smoothly through the darkness. too large and too upright to be a bear, too smooth and purposeful to be a man in a suit stumbling through the woods at 3 in the morning. I watched that 3 seconds of footage maybe 50 times, zoomed in as far as the resolution would allow, tried to see details. The shape was covered in hair, that much was clear. Long arms, broad shoulders, moving with a gait that wasn't quite human and wasn't quite ape. My heart was hammering. After 7 days, I had video evidence. Grainy, brief, not conclusive, but evidence. Something large and bipedal had walked past my camera at 3 in the morning. And if it had been that close to my camp in the middle of the night, it knew I was here. It had probably been watching me, maybe for days. Day 8 started with me checking my remaining trail cameras, repositioning a couple of them to cover new angles. Late afternoon, I was back at my observation post on the ridge overlooking a small valley. The sun was starting to get low, painting everything in golden light. I was tired, 7 days of intense focus, minimal sleep, constant vigilance. I was considering packing it in for the day when I saw movement down the slope. About 80 yards below me, something emerged from the tree line into a small clearing. It was a Sasquatch. No question, no ambiguity. I'd spent 8 days hoping for this moment, and now that it was here, my brain almost couldn't process it. The creature was massive, 8 or 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown to black hair, shoulders like a linebacker, arms that hung below its knees, legs thick as tree trunks, moving upright with a gait that was powerful and purposeful. It walked into the clearing and paused, seeming to examine something on the ground. Plants, maybe, or rocks. I couldn't tell from this distance. But it gave me a perfect broadside shot. Clear angle, no obstructions, well within my rifle's effective range. I raised my rifle, hands shaking so badly I had to take 3 deep breaths to steady them, lined up the shot through the scope. The Sasquatch's torso filled my field of view. I could see individual hairs, could see the rise and fall of its breathing, could see muscles moving under the skin. For maybe 5 seconds, I hesitated. This was an intelligent being standing there in that clearing. Maybe not human, but clearly not just an animal either. The structures, the footprints with dermal ridges, the wood-knocking communication patterns, all evidence of intelligence. The systematic tool use, the awareness of its environment, the ability to remain hidden for centuries despite living alongside humans. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was something that thought, that planned, that made decisions. Was I really going to shoot it? Kill it? For what? Revenge for something I couldn't prove it had done? Answers that might die with it? Justice for a disappearance that might have had nothing to do with Sasquatches at all? My finger rested on the trigger, and for those 5 seconds I wrestled with the decision that would define the rest of my life. Then I thought of the young ranger, thought of him walking alone through the forest, radio off, disappearing without a trace. Thought of the 3 weeks of searching. Thought of his parents at the memorial service, hollow-eyed and destroyed. Thought of my guilt, my obsession, my need to know. I pulled the trigger, the rifle cracked. The sound echoed across the valley. Through the scope, I saw the Sasquatch jerk. Saw it stagger slightly, hit center mass right where I'd aimed. I worked the bolt action, chambered another round, kept the scope on target. The Sasquatch didn't go down. I'd expected it to drop immediately. A .30-06 round to the chest drop's elk like someone cut their power cord. But the Sasquatch just turned toward me, slowly, deliberately. And even from 80 yards away, even through the scope, I could see its eyes lock onto mine. I fired again, another solid hit. The Sasquatch barely flinched, like I'd thrown a rock at it instead of shooting it with a weapon designed to kill half-ton animals. My blood went cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nothing survives 2 center mass hits from a .30-06. Nothing. The Sasquatch started moving toward me, not running, not charging in a blind rage, just walking with those long, powerful strides, covering ground impossibly fast, steady, purposeful, like it had all the time in the world and knew exactly what it was going to do when it reached me. I scrambled backward, trying to put distance between us while working the bolt action, fumbled the round, dropped it, cursed, pulled another from my pocket. The Sasquatch was halfway up the slope now, maybe 40 yards away. I chambered the round, raised the rifle, fired. Wild shot, missed completely. Heard the round whine off a rock somewhere behind it. 20 yards, I could see its face now. Dark, deep-set eyes, not the blank stare of an animal. Intelligence behind those eyes. Awareness, but not rage. Not the berserker fury I'd expected. Just focus. I dropped the rifle and went for my handgun. Got it halfway out of the holster before the Sasquatch was on me. One massive hand clamped onto my shoulder, and I was lifted off the ground like a child picking up a doll. Looked up at its face from inches away, saw the intelligence in its eyes, saw recognition. It knew what I was, knew what I'd tried to do, knew I'd failed. Then it hit me, not with its fist, more like an open hand strike to the center of my chest. The impact drove all the air from my lungs. I felt ribs crack, felt the world spin, felt myself flying backward, hit the ground hard, rocks and dirt. Head bounced off something solid, flash of white light, then darkness. Which brings me back to where this story started. Me hanging in a tree 15 feet off the ground, wedged in branches with no memory of how I got there. Night had fallen completely, stars visible through the canopy, moon casting enough light to see shapes but not details. Everything hurt. Chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. Head throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Arms and legs were bruised, but I was alive. That was the first thing I focused on. Alive, not dead, not torn apart, not killed by the thing I'd just shot twice. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through my chest, sharp enough to make me gasp. Ribs definitely cracked or broken. Deep breath was agony. Shallow breaths only marginally better. I forced myself to stay still, to assess the situation methodically. Ranger training kicking in even through the pain and confusion. I was wedged between several branches, suspended 15 or 20 feet above the ground. My jacket was snagged on branches above me. My pants were caught on branches below me. I was basically hanging from my own clothing, spread-eagled in this tree like some kind of bizarre scarecrow. When I tried to pull free, the branches held fast. Every movement sent waves of pain through my chest. Panic tried to set in, but I forced it down. Panic gets you killed in the wilderness. Stay calm, think, problem solve. I'd been in worse situations, not many, granted, but some. I could handle this. First question, what time was it? I checked my watch. The crystal was cracked, but it still worked. 11:47 p.m. I'd been unconscious for about 6 hours. That lined up with the light. Sun had been setting when I got hit. Now it was full dark. Second question, how badly was I hurt? I did a mental inventory. Ribs cracked or broken, painful but not immediately life-threatening as long as I could breathe. Possible concussion from hitting my head. Arms and legs bruised but functional. No sharp pain suggesting internal bleeding. No broken bones except possibly the ribs. Overall assessment, banged up, in pain, but not dying, not yet anyway. Third question, how did I get in this tree? That was the big one. Last thing I remembered was the Sasquatch hitting me, hitting the ground, darkness. Next thing I knew, I was here. 15 feet up. The Sasquatch must have put me here, must have lifted my unconscious body and carefully positioned me in these branches. But why? I spent 20 minutes carefully testing the branches around me, trying to find a way down without cutting myself free. Every branch I could reach was either too weak to support my weight or positioned wrong for me to get leverage. I'd have to cut myself loose and drop from 15 feet up with cracked ribs. This was going to suck. I checked my belt. Knife was still in its sheath. Thank God for small favors. I pulled it out, opened the blade, and started cutting. Started with the jacket, the thickest fabric and the hardest to cut through. The blade was sharp, but working overhead with a throbbing head, and cracked ribs made everything harder. Cut through one sleeve, then shifted position to reach the other. More cutting, more pain. Finally freed both arms. Moved down to my pants, easier to reach but still awkward. Cut through the fabric snagged on branches below me. Slow, careful cuts because I couldn't see well in the darkness, and I didn't want to accidentally slash myself. Finally cut the last piece of fabric holding me. I dropped, 8 feet maybe. Landed badly, mostly on my side. The impact drove what little air I had from my lungs and re-aggravated my ribs. White-hot pain. I lay there in dead leaves, gasping, trying not to scream. Waited for the pain to subside from unbearable to merely awful. Took 5 minutes. Eventually, I managed to sit up. Leaned against the tree trunk, breathing carefully, trying to think through what had happened. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I'd shot the Sasquatch twice. Center mass, solid hits. It should have killed me. Had every reason to kill me. Had the opportunity and the means. Instead, it knocked me out and put me in a tree. Why? I checked myself over more thoroughly by moonlight. Bruises everywhere. Chest already showing dark purple discoloration where the Sasquatch had hit me. Bumps on my head, cuts and scrapes. But nothing life-threatening, nothing that would require immediate evacuation. The Sasquatch had been gentle, not gentle exactly, but restrained. It had used the minimum force necessary to stop me, then ensured I was safe. Safe. That was the word that kept coming back. It put me in a tree to keep me safe. And suddenly, that made perfect sense. It was nighttime. Nighttime is when predators hunt. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, all more active after dark. An unconscious human on the ground would be vulnerable, easy prey, but 15 feet up in a tree? Safe from anything that couldn't climb or couldn't reach that high. The Sasquatch had protected me. I'd shot it, tried to kill it, and its response was to knock me out and protect me. Not aggression, not revenge, not violence beyond what was necessary to stop the threat I represented. Just restraint, mercy, intelligence. My mind was reeling. Every assumption I'd had was wrong. I'd gone into this thinking Sasquatches were dangerous, aggressive, that they'd killed the young ranger, that they were threats to be confronted and stopped. But this didn't fit that narrative. This was the behavior of something intelligent and compassionate. Something that could have killed me easily but chose not to. Something that went out of its way to keep me safe after I'd attacked it. Which brought me to the young ranger. If Sasquatches weren't aggressive, what happened to him? All my theories, all my certainty, suddenly I had no idea. Maybe a Sasquatch did take him, but not violently. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. Maybe he stumbled onto their territory and they had to remove him for their own protection. Maybe they relocated him somehow, kept him somewhere, and he's still alive. Unlikely, but I couldn't rule it out anymore. Or maybe Sasquatches had nothing to do with his disappearance. Maybe there's something else in these woods, something more dangerous, something that even Sasquatches avoid. And if the Sasquatch put me in a tree to protect me from nighttime predators, was it protecting me from bears and mountain lions, or from something else? I had more questions now than when I started. 6 years of certainty, 6 years of guilt and obsession, and one encounter had shattered everything I thought I knew. I knew I needed medical attention. Cracked ribs and possible concussion aren't things to take lightly. But I also knew that calling for a rescue would mean questions. Search and rescue teams, park rangers, maybe law enforcement. They'd want to know what happened, how I got injured, why I was out here, and what was I going to tell them? That I'd shot a Sasquatch and it mercifully refrained from killing me? They'd have me on a psych hold before the helicopter touched down. I decided to walk out. It would be painful and dangerous with my injuries, but it was doable. I'd hiked these mountains for 31 years. I knew how to navigate. I knew how to survive. And I needed time alone to process what had happened. First, I needed to find my rifle. I backtracked carefully in the moonlight, following the slope up to where I'd been positioned when I took the shots, found my observation post, found the rifle lying where I dropped it. I checked it over, dirty but undamaged. The Sasquatch hadn't taken it, hadn't thrown it away, hadn't bent the barrel or broken the stock, just left it where it fell. I searched the area where I'd shot the Sasquatch, found the 2 spent casings from my rifle, found where my wild third shot had hit a tree about 10 yards behind where the Sasquatch had been standing. But no blood trail, no hair, no evidence that I'd hit anything at all. Either my shots had missed, which I knew they hadn't, or the Sasquatch was tough enough that 2.3006 rounds through the chest weren't enough to make it bleed externally. That thought was terrifying. What kind of physiology allows something to take 2 rifle rounds center mass and keep functioning? Thick hide, dense muscle, bone structure we don't understand? I had no idea. Added it to the growing list of questions I couldn't answer. The hike back to my camp took an hour and hurt with every step. Ribs screaming, head pounding. But I made it. Packed my essential gear, tent, sleeping bag, first aid kit, food, left the rest cached under a tarp. Maybe I'd come back for it someday, maybe not. Before I left, I checked my trail cameras. The one that had captured the Sasquatch walking past at 3 a.m. had triggered again at 6:23 p.m., right around the time I'd shot it. The footage showed the Sasquatch carrying something, carrying me, my unconscious body slung over its shoulder like a sack of grain, walking past the camera, heading uphill, presumably to where it placed me in the tree. The image was clear enough to see details. The Sasquatch's face, the intelligence in its eyes, the careful way it carried me, supporting my weight, making sure I didn't slip. I had proof, photographic evidence, clear images of a Sasquatch. But looking at that footage, all I felt was shame. I'd attacked this creature, tried to kill it, and it had responded with mercy. The 8-mile hike out took nearly 10 hours. Normally, it would take 4 or 5, but with my injuries, I had to move slowly, stop frequently, rest, keep sipping water and forcing down food even though I wasn't hungry. By the time I reached my truck, dawn was breaking. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, just breathing before I started the engine. Drove 2 hours to the nearest town, found an urgent care clinic that was just opening. Told the doctor I'd slipped on loose rocks while hiking, fell down a slope, hit my head and chest on the way down. Close enough to the truth that I didn't have to remember complicated lies. The doctor bought it. Hikers get injured all the time out here. X-rays confirmed 3 cracked ribs. CT scans showed a mild concussion but no brain bleeding. Severe bruising across my chest and back. Cuts and scrapes. They gave me pain medication, instructions for managing the ribs, told me to take it easy for 6 weeks. No strenuous activity. Come back if symptoms worsened. I thanked them, paid cash, and left. I spent the next 6 weeks recovering in my empty house, rattling around rooms that felt too large for one person. Ribs hurt like hell for the first 3 weeks. Sharp, stabbing pain with every breath, every movement, every time I shifted position in bed. Simple tasks like getting dressed or reaching for something on a shelf became exercises in pain management. Concussion symptoms, pounding headaches, dizziness that made me grab for walls, trouble focusing my eyes on text lasted about 10 days before gradually fading. Physically, I healed according to the doctor's predictions. Mentally, I was more confused and conflicted than I'd ever been in my life. I reviewed the trail camera footage obsessively. Hundreds of times, the Sasquatch walking past at 3 a.m., the Sasquatch carrying me at 6:23 p.m. Both clips showed the same creature, massive, powerful, covered in dark hair, but also careful, deliberate. The way it walked, the way it carried me, everything suggested intelligence and awareness. I had proof, clear photographic evidence that Sasquatches exist. Evidence that would shake the scientific community, change our understanding of North American wildlife, probably make me famous or at least notorious. But I couldn't share it, wouldn't share it, because sharing it would mean exposing these creatures to the world, would mean hunters and scientists and tourists flooding into their territory, would mean the end of their secrecy, the end of their survival strategy that had worked for centuries. They'd shown me mercy. The least I could do was show them the same. The question of what happened to the young ranger still haunts me. I have theories but no answers. Maybe Sasquatches were involved, maybe they weren't. Maybe he's alive somewhere, maybe he's dead. Maybe there are aggressive Sasquatches and passive ones, different populations with different temperaments. Maybe the one I encountered was unusual in its restraint, or maybe they're all like that. Intelligent, careful, avoiding humans when possible, but capable of mercy when confronted. I don't know, after 31 years as a ranger and an 8-day hunt that ended with me hanging in a tree, I have more questions than I started with. The only thing I know for certain is that Sasquatches are real, they're intelligent, and they're not the monsters people imagine. I shot one twice and it chose to let me live. That's not monster behavior, that's something else. Something better than most humans would show in the same situation. I think about going back sometimes, not to hunt, but to try to understand. To maybe make peace with the Sasquatch I shot. To apologize somehow, though I have no idea how you apologize to something that doesn't speak your language. Maybe just being there, unarmed, would be apology enough. Or maybe I should stay away, leave them alone, let them maintain their secrecy. I haven't decided yet. What I have decided is that I'm done hunting them. Done trying to prove they exist to a world that isn't ready to know. Done with the obsession that cost me my marriage, my relationship with my kids, 6 years of guilt, and nearly cost me my life. Now I understand why they stay hidden. Because humans shoot first and ask questions never. Because we can't be trusted with the knowledge that something else, something intelligent and powerful, shares our forests. Because the moment we know for certain they exist, we'll destroy them. Hunt them, capture them, study them, turn them into attractions or trophies or scientific specimens. They have every right to hide from us, every right to protect themselves and their secrets. And I'm going to help them do it by keeping mine. This story is my confession, my attempt to process what happened and make sense of it. A warning to anyone else who goes looking for Sasquatch. You might find them, but you probably won't get the answers you expect. And you might learn something about yourself you didn't want to know. I learned that I'm capable of trying to kill an intelligent being out of revenge for something I couldn't prove it did. I learned that my obsession was really about guilt, not justice. I learned that sometimes the monster isn't the thing hiding in the woods, it's the person with the gun. And I learned that mercy exists in unexpected places, that intelligence and compassion aren't uniquely human traits, that sometimes the things we fear the most are less dangerous than we are. I woke up hanging in a tree with cracked ribs and a shattered worldview. And in a strange way, hanging there in the darkness, hurting but alive, I learned more about the truth of these creatures in those few hours than I had in 31 years of searching. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from our failures, not our successes. Sometimes we learn the most when our expectations are completely overturned. Sometimes the best way to find answers is to stop asking questions and start listening. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than you want it to be, messier than the neat narratives we construct in our minds. And sometimes the monster shows mercy and leaves you more lost than you started, but alive and wiser and humbled in ways you never expected. That's my story. Believe it or don't. Share it or keep it to yourself. Just remember, if you go looking for Sasquatch, be prepared for answers you don't expect. Be prepared to be wrong about everything you thought you knew, and be prepared for the possibility that the thing you're hunting might be more human than you are. For more interesting stories, check this out.